All right. Hello, my name is Sarah Gura, and I'm a master's level licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois and a licensed mental health counselor here in Florida. My practice is the self-care path, and I specialize in treating first responders. I'm here with David, and we're going to talk about retirement. So, first things first, David, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Sarah, it's great to be here. Just fun collaborating with you, and I love what you are doing out there in the world. By way of intro, my name's David Dachinger. I kind of got into the fire service in a unusual way in that we bought a house in the suburbs next to a firehouse and went from being worried about the lights and sirens and the distractions and the disturbances to getting invited to a barbecue, and they were like, come check out a drill. I'm like, okay. And it seemed interesting. So I kept going back and got myself immersed in the fire service and wound up getting hired with a career department in Connecticut and working there, being promoted to lieutenant, and really learned a lot about the profession that has served me in my post firefighter years. So I'm sure we'll talk about some of that. But today I am a podcast host of two different podcasts. One is called Responder Resilience, and the other is called Igniting the Shift Within. I've also, on the home stretch of putting out a book with my two co-hosts, Bonnie Rumely, LCSW, EMT, and Dr. Stacy Raymond. The book is called Helping the Helpers, Clinician's Guide to First Responder Mental Wellness. Sarah, you were an incredible contributor to that book, and so really excited about that. And besides that, I live in Florida, love getting outside, doing some gardening, hanging out with my dog, and being as creative as I can.
That's awesome. I love that we have met each other too. I was being nosy because they said I was in the top 25 of first responder podcasts. And I was like, well, who else is on the list? And that's how I found you. And yes, since then it seems that I'm learning so much about what else is being done about first responder psychological support. And the collaborations have been just an honor and a pleasure. So thanks for that. Um, but again, today we're going to shift and talk about retirement. I don't know if we do enough for our police and fire when it comes to retirement. We say we have meetings or we say we're going to get together. Sometimes we never get to that retirement party even, or there's a sense of something ended and I don't know how to go back. So I would love just your initial thoughts about why you're focusing on psychological support for retirement too.
I didn't realize this would be such a topic near and dear to my heart. Obviously, I've gone through the process. I've lived some of the ups and downs of retiring. But the more I thought about it and started to write about it, and we created a two-part documentary on responder resilience, and I've started to speak about it at different conferences. I realize that there is a great need, that we're not preparing our first responders for retirement. Some places maybe have some provisions in place, maybe even as early as the rookie recruit phase. But I'd say overall, even though maybe people are financially prepared, they are typically not prepared mentally, emotionally. Their family dynamics are not being considered. It can just be a gut-wrenching blow to hit that finish line. And after, if you do have a retirement party, after the dust settles on that, all of a sudden you've got this new reality, which after maybe a couple of months of the novelty of not having to show up, holidays, weekends, family occasions, working through those working 48s, now you're not doing that anymore. And all of a sudden you're left with nothing but silence. The sirens have faded, the adrenaline rush is gone. That is something that many people struggle with. And, the good news is there's hope. There are ways to cope with it and come out on the other side, with a great, we call it Life 2.0.
Well, I love that. So when it comes to retirement planning, I know I talk about with the guys that we have like pre-retirement, and then we have like an early retirement phase. And then retirement itself is 24 hours, it's like a 24-hour day. And then after it, we call it reconciliation, where you're just trying to readjust, right? Adapt and overcome this new phase of life. But I'm curious, when you mentioned, hey, we need to do better with retirement planning, what are you referencing there?
Well, a number of things. The big one that comes up all the time is identity. We are great at our jobs, and we also are great at becoming like a single source identity, meaning, I became Dave the firefighter, I became Dave the lieutenant, I became Dave the B shifter, and after I got promoted, I became Dave the A shifter. Like our whole life can tend to be totally revolving around that job, the department, the shift, crew. And when the job is done, however that happens, then we're left with, all right, who am I? Like, where do I go from here? What's my purpose in the world? You've gone from having an incredible mission, an epic mission. You've done epic things with your crew that, most people will never dream about experiencing. And again, once you've left the department, how do you replace that? On so many levels, right? It's a hormonal thing, right? We have adrenaline, we have cortisol dumps, we also have positive hormones, which are things like oxytocin and serotonin, where we're helping people. We feel good because we're doing good deeds. We solve problems. So, but the identity piece would be, in my mind, in my opinion, the one that people struggle with the most because we don't really create this, persona of who we are post-retirement.
I couldn't agree more. And with the identity, as it approaches, I see in the office anxieties about I'm old, I'm a has-been, I'm getting booted out, in with the new, out with the old feeling. And I always tell my clients we're a social species, which means we're a tribal species and a sexual, species. And as we age and get close to retirement, you had mentioned things about connection too. And if they didn't have other identities, like I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a human, I'm a person, I'm not just a worker, or a firefighter or a police officer. I see them a little more lost pre-retirement. So I'm curious what you have to say about identity and these social connections.
Yeah, so such a big piece, right? The family piece in itself. We can kind of lose ourselves in that too because we're away from home quite a bit. Our spouse may have stepped up and they've got their own life. They've learned how to handle things when we're gone. And, we show up when we're done with shift and kind of reintegrate for a couple of days and then go back to shift. So there's a whole family dynamic piece, which is like, all right, how do we reintegrate now that we're not doing that job anymore? How do we, you know, have a conversation or find the interplay between ourselves and our spouse and our kids that now we're home full time. And sometimes that may seem like a good thing, but it may not be a good thing in terms of our spouse is not used to us being home all the time, right? We don't, it can get old quick if we don't have, a life of our own, interests of our own. So that's one thing that I would say in terms of pre-planning. I believe strongly in having some amount of pre-planning for retirement because so many things are going to come into play. And when I do my presentation, I actually have I'll show it to you here, but I have a sheet that I present and I have folks fill out that is,
Nice.
you can see that. It's a 10-step pre-plan that addresses everything from your legacy to when to start planning for retirement. Do you have a plan A, B, C? Preparing for an unforeseen retirement. Financial planning advice. I actually do kind of like a time travel thing, go back in time to your rookie self. And what would you tell your rookie self now, that you know now that you didn't know back then that would help? Coping with the loss of identity, tribe, and mission. What do you envision your next chapter? Because if we don't have that vision, at least something to go with, right? Moving from the job, fishing, boating, gardening, sitting on the back porch, going to the beach. That's great for a little while, but it can get old. We're doers, right? We are very motivated people who are mission driven. And I don't think most of us do that well with just hanging out and doing, kind of just chilling. The other two steps, just real quick, are how to stay emotionally and physically fit in retirement. How will your retirement affect family and friends, which is what we're just talking about, and coping with the emotional impact of leaving the profession. So those are some of the points that we get into in the discussion. But when we leave the job, some of us leave older than others, some of us leave younger than others. Um, yeah, who am I, right? That's kind of like the burning question. Who am I now? And the good news is we can take those skills that we have, right? We can take the way we're wired to be of service and to help others and to do something positive in the world and repurpose them. And we can get into that, but I think there's some great examples of that out there.
For sure. I think, those skills are definitely transferable. And I've noticed that there's, maybe an A and B crowd, a crowd that wants to be absolutely done and they're a little bitter and salty about everything. And then there's the other crowd that's like, I can't stop and I'm already applying for these other positions. And I did a podcast in the past called I'm Not the Job. And it was like kind of offensive to some people. They were like, what do you mean? And I had said in there, like, stop saying I am a firefighter or I am a police officer. Identify yourself. I'm a Sarah. Therapy is how I make money,
Mhm.
and people felt, well, that sounds really cold. I don't know what you're talking about. So this is very different, I think, in the first responder world to go through a major transition and an adjustment in identity. And it does have to do with all of those things you mentioned, from money to relationships to what am I going to do? How am I going to relax?
Yeah, and you mentioned I am statements. I mean, that in itself, right, so powerful. To say, I am old or I'm, useless or whatever someone says when they get to that place. Those are powerful statements. We need to like flip the script, right? Come up with, like you said, something more that serves us better. I am human. I am a father. I am a helper. Whatever that is, that can be translated, that can be transferred into something, maybe it's not obvious the day we retire. It might take a year. It might take 2 years. My case, I had a plan A. I was like, all right, I'm going to retire June 4th, whatever, I think it was 2021, because I had a opportunity to create videos for kind of calming videos for inmates in the prison in LA. Well, I got to the finish line, retired, and that gig just fizzled. Didn't happen. And now I'm like,
Mm.
what the hell am I going to do?
Well, now what? Yeah.
So fortunately, I'd met Bonnie and Stacy, the clinicians who were part of the Fairfield County Trauma Response Team, because they came to my department, made a presentation, opened my world up to like, wow, I never heard of EMDR. I didn't know there was such a thing as a culturally competent clinician who knows first responder world. All these things that they offered, debriefings and trainings. So I started going to their peer support group after retiring, and I saw their great chemistry, and I was with other first responders, and I saw the sort of healing capabilities of group work like that. I'm like, what if we started a podcast, the three of us? And so that led to Responder Resilience. Now, that wasn't my plan A. I didn't have that in my sights, but I was determined to find something that would kind of keep me connected with the first responder world, do something. I love being creative. I love music and video, and have these great conversations with guests like you, learning stuff, like, meeting people I never would have met before and feeling like I'm hopefully making a difference out there. So the bottom line is, plan A may not work. May take a year to figure out what it is, but just, I guess, get in touch with what your core kind of purpose is and see, play with things, try things out, talk to people, see what's working for different people. But I'm convinced that there's a new chapter for any first responder who retires who has that amazing skill set, experience, mission driven, service driven lifestyle.
I agree with you on that too, but what it also makes me think about is stress and loss. that there's this stress and loss that happens at retirement or an uncertainty, or like you said, there's a plan and then that plan doesn't happen. What can you speak on related to what you're seeing with the stressful part, the painful part, the losses that happen at retirement?
That's so critical. It's you got to grieve it. It's a huge loss, and it's a loss like no other in some ways. Absolutely have to grieve it and acknowledge it for what it is, because a lot of us are retiring with unresolved trauma, stuff we've pushed down and ignored since childhood. Some of us with the military experiences, and then the whole gamut of things that happened during the first responder career, whether it's on the streets or inside the agency. So we are coming into retirement sometimes at a deficit. Like we are now, we have a lot of baggage, or buckets that are full of sludge that need to be emptied. And so, I mean, one proactive piece of that is start looking at that before you retire. Like, start to go see a therapist, do EMDR, process those traumas before you get to the finish line, so you can go into retirement a little like less, loaded down with all that, baggage you've been carrying. In terms of the grief, it truly is, I think the only way out is through to truly grieve that loss. And sometimes it's super painful, right? You can be reminded, and it happens to me to this day, fire engine goes by, lights and sirens, pass an MVA on the side of the highway. I go to the firehouse and see the guys, and you're having a cup of coffee, the call comes in, the tones drop, they go on the rig, you're sitting there drinking your coffee by yourself. It's like, it's a huge loss, and we got to name it for what it is. However, if we are able to grieve it and kind of move through it and process it, then we can start to put that energy into something, purposeful.
Absolutely. I guess as a therapist, I want to say, I recognize that in the therapy office. And when I first started, it was actually more chiefs and senior officers that I was working with. I don't know if the young guys didn't want to work with a young therapist, or if like young guys didn't want to admit in that time frame almost 20 years ago that, they had thoughts and feelings about their career. But it was older guys, and I was listening to their stories about fearing retirement and even worrying about the potentially traumatic events, the PTEs that would turn into what we now call sickness, SIC, which I say that with all the love in my heart, that the guys are sick, which is I'm getting spontaneous intrusive cognitions. Because when I go past this intersection, I think of this accident, or when I see that white cross, I don't see a white cross. I know who died there. When I look at that building, that's the bipolar that never took her medication, and that was a trip. So those things kind of come back to them, and they would come in the therapy office and say, Sarah, I was sitting in the lazy boy. I was doing nothing, and I start sweating. I have heart palpitations. I feel like I want to cry, and I don't know why. And so we would start there. So speaking of the EMDR you mentioned, the only way out is through. And so one of the things I recommend is, if you can before retirement, definitely take those top listed calls that you've been carrying around
Mhm.
and consider the EMDR. Consider seeing if you could desensitize the intensity of those flashbacks and, reprocess what your brain has been thinking about those traumas, so that when you flash forward in retirement, it's not as intimidating. It doesn't look like one big cycle of trauma. So,
Yeah, and so this is a huge thing. Look, my opinion is, as first responders, we are really good at taking care of other people and not so good at taking care of ourselves, to the point of, and I've seen this numerous times, we will carry that burden of suffering. The calls that we did everything right, but the outcome wasn't what we wanted, and we still beat ourselves up for that and still carry that forward. Add into that all the other accumulated trauma we were talking about, adverse childhood, military, moral injury within the agency, institutional abandonment, and 30 years of that, without looking at it and processing it. Now you're going to carry that into retirement, and those are supposed to be the best years of your life. You worked your butt off for this, right? This is supposed to be the golden time to enjoy the fruits of your labor, and still carrying that backpack full of pebbles or stones of all these, traumatic events. We kind of owe it to ourselves to dump that backpack, right? Just,
Yes.
do what it takes to like move through it so we're not suffering in retirement. So that is a huge thing. And I've seen so many people, breaks my heart, who just are, they think it's their right to suffer, or it's their, they need to suffer for some reason. But you've already contributed so much doing this job. You've given, you've
Yes.
sacrificed so much. Your family has sacrificed. And now, on top of that, we know the negative effects of all carrying this trauma and repressed emotion. The negative effects of that on health, are profound. So go into your retirement years as healthy as you can. Dump the bucket, dump the backpack, and kind of, release that stuff so you can enjoy it and be healthy as long as possible.
Yes. And that, I'm looking at the mental and physical, and we talk about resilience and post-traumatic growth, and for me, resilience is, can I handle this day even though crap hit my fan? Can I still use my coping skills and, make the better choice for myself and not self-sabotage? Post-traumatic growth, it seems to be left behind. So PTG is all about getting through those traumas. And if you can prepare for your money and prepare for your physical health, but you deny yourself to be prepared to mentally retire, it's going to catch up to you. And so before that 24-hour period of your retirement day, I know I would suggest do your traumas before, not after. But I'm curious what you think about preparing mentally and physically for retirement.
I would agree with you 100% that, yeah, the sooner you can start to address those things, the better. There's so much to it that, we look at as firefighters, we become really proactive about cancer prevention, awareness, and, taking steps, getting scanned, getting checked. We're getting pretty good about that in general. I mean, there's departments that have, you know, uh, diagnostic services coming to the department. We're having a day where a diagnostic, say, skin cancer screening is at one station. Everybody can come on duty, off duty. We're getting really good about that. But this is the same thing needs to apply to mental health. We need to like become more proactive about mental health. We need to especially tend to our retirees or people that are nearing retirement, say 3 to 5 years out, that prepare them for success in the next chapter. Don't leave them out there in the world after serving, for decades, giving so much. Don't leave them unprepared to face retirement and to kind of suffer further. I just breaks my heart every time I see a first responder suffering needlessly, especially after they've left the job.
When you say suffer, I think there's a couple ways that they suffer. One, trying to like grin and bear it. And then, of course, there's the I ignore, I deny, I minimize, I try to numb, which are all different types of dissociating from the job and yet identifying so strongly with it. So there's this conflict within some of the guys and gals. I say guys and truly mean both, by the way. But that conflict within is also something I see in the therapy office, that I am statement paired with, I also don't want to deal with any of the things that are haunting me. And yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something there?
Well, to that, a friend of mine did an amazing career in, I won't say the career, but in emergency services, one that is in some ways the most brutal, what they witness, and left after decades. And still to this day is not willing to look at their traumas, and they know it. They will talk about how they broke down and cried after watching a movie or something, and say, I know I need to do EMDR or something, and still not take that step. And it's like, I don't know how do we get people, how do we help people in that situation? How do we kind of move them forward?
I think one of the most popular questions is like, what is EMDR going to do to me? Like, what can I expect? Why does it work? Um, and I think what I have found is the most soothing answer is that EMDR is intimidating. It will activate your trauma. It will escalate, everything that you see in a very vivid way. So if the trauma is really big and you're not even really revisiting it, it's about to get so much bigger, when you do EMDR. And that I think keeps people from wanting to touch it, which is why I tell them there's something called resource development. And every EMDR clinician knows that heading toward a trauma could make us want to dissociate or shut down or not address it at all. And then it subconsciously and psychosomatically, physiologically will bother us. So the benefit is getting rid of that. But I tell them, if you are not ready, we don't have to like start EMDR in this trauma right now. We can do resource development. You can learn how to cope with being activated. And from activation down to homeostasis, David, is allostasis, right? So this journey of allostasis so that you can feel balanced allows us to put one foot in the past, dealing with that trauma, while one foot is firmly planted in the present moment. So I think, as EMDR therapists that specialize in treating first responders, we have to say that a little more to help with the intimidation of vividly remembering a trauma through an EMDR treatment.
Yeah. And I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Stacy Raymond, who um, is an EMDR trauma clinician, works with first responders, probably police more than any other profession. And we put together a video of a police officer who is former NYPD. He's a cop's cop, tough guy. And it's basically a recording of a live EMDR session with him processing two incredibly traumatic incidents. It's been shown to police. It's actually, I believe it's on her website, but Stacy will say when she shows that video of Officer Pete processing his traumas in an EMDR session, you can hear a pin drop in the room. That now you've kind of pulled the curtain back on this mystical EMDR, and you're seeing, one of your own processing an incredibly difficult call, and you see how it, how he shifts in a short amount of time. To me, that's the kind of stuff that maybe more first responders need, is like, take the mystique out of it and just, just watch it happen.
That's a great point too. So, in addition to the resource development, in addition to preparing to feel activated, allostasis, homeostasis, that video is invaluable. So I'll definitely make sure I reference all of your contact information in the link below, right? And people can maybe watch that video too, because you're right. They need to kind of see, what is this voodoo that you're talking about? Why does it work?
Yeah.
Because not only do they have questions, but I've had other even doctoral level therapists say EMDR is like nothing. Or I had a clinician down here in Florida introduce themselves to me and then apologize that I'm an EMDR therapist because it doesn't work. And I just thought to myself, you're hurting people. You're taking away something if you're telling police, fire, military, dispatchers, ER professionals, something like that.
Well, it's
You're
also,
maybe taking away a
um,
treatment.
I think it's also, the point that you're also indicating is that it's important to seek out a clinician who understands the culture of first responders, and perhaps, as an EMDR therapist, you understanding the culture enhances your ability to help people heal because you're so, so well versed in it. So, not to say that someone who's not experienced with first responder culture couldn't do effective EMDR, but I think it's important for us as first responders to know that I think we go into it with a feeling of we don't want to break the therapist by, sharing our traumas, sharing the calls, and flip the script where now we're caring for them instead of getting the mental health care we need. So, important point. We talk about it in our book, and I'm sure you do as well, that, you know, maybe everybody who's out there with a shingle is not necessarily the best fit for a first responder, but we need to do our due diligence for that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct too. And that's why I love what you guys are doing as far as the clinician's guide in this book and kind of organizing it so that we can build more trust and show that we've done the work, whether it is those ride-alongs or sitting in or just having more experience treating this population. So my hope, even in talking about it right now, is to say to somebody who's listening, if you have those traumas, if you have those worries, if retirement is coming up and you can tell through this conversation that you might need a little post-traumatic growth, where you grow away from your roots and you do change and you do evolve. There are people that can do it pretty smoothly
Mhm.
these days. Maybe not 10, 20 years ago, but now.
Yes. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'd love to, touch on post-traumatic growth as well. Like, um, one of the things that's kind of fascinating for me personally is that I saw things in my career that disturbed me, right? And there were more things like within the department, the leadership, and things that I didn't think were handled properly. And in my new chapter, I feel like I'm having the opportunity to not really right the wrongs, but address them, right? Because I've seen things happen with poor leadership where I thought it could be done better. I know it can be done better now that I've spoken to a lot of amazing leaders on the podcast. And so, and I've spoken to other people who have been through the same thing. They had a bad experience in their department, went on to become, let's say, start a conference. And through the conference is almost like a cathartic effect of, again, addressing something that you felt was an injustice, and now you're able to like put something more positive out there in the world, and maybe so it won't happen to the next person. So, just to say that in retirement, you got to kind of embrace the possibilities, right? Yes, it's the end of this epic career. You probably can't replace it. Maybe never be able to get those adrenaline rushes again and the same kind of camaraderie. You can get close, and I'm still working on that. But if you have a passion for helping people and impacting people, and especially for supporting your fellow brothers and sisters who are first responders, there are so many ways out there you can do that to just kind of pay forward all the things you've experienced, learned, right or wrong, do something positive out there in the world. Just stay open, keep those realms of possibility, like, in consideration at all times, and maybe just don't judge too harshly, whether something is a good fit or not. Sometimes you got to step out of the comfort zone and try things, and it doesn't work. But sometimes the greatest things in life are outside your comfort zone.
Yes to that. And then I want to play devil's advocate a little bit because sometimes we retire, like I said before, a little bitter or unexpectedly or sooner than what we thought because of a mental injury, or maybe it's a physical injury, or sometimes because we're not great at treating behavior yet, we get that 1, 2, 3 last chance agreement.
Mhm.
I'm kind of curious what you think about that when there's a retirement that was unexpected.
Yeah, we covered that quite a bit in the documentary, and they're heartbreaking. People who said all I ever wanted to do was be a firefighter, and that was my goal in life, and then be dramatically injured on a MVA on the side of a highway. But then you see that, again, kind of talking about going out of the comfort zone or being open to possibilities. This one firefighter, Steve, he was told he wasn't going to walk again, and he managed to get through that piece and got a coupon for hot yoga. And he's like, okay, it's a free yoga thing. I'll go. He went the first day and he's like, well, I got 6 more days on the coupon. I'll keep going back. So he went back the full week, wound up getting hooked, became a yoga instructor. He's also gone on to become a nurse, but it's kind of like sometimes, you got to think outside the box, right? Especially when we're so conditioned to be, you know, predictable, stable, have that, kind of everything, run everything according to policy and, pre-plan and all that. So, but it hits, yeah, the unexpected retirement can hit super hard. And sometimes, again, it's that grieving period is so important. And when we come out of it, I'm seeing people who have come out the other side, finding something that's they really love doing. So can we prepare for it? I don't think so. None of us wants to like think, well, what am I going to do if, next week something, career-ending injury happens? Nobody thinks that way. And we shouldn't probably, but we really need to kind of like give ourselves time to, go through whatever it is post career and then start to like take stock on, okay, this is my life now. Where do I go from here? What's possible? How do I kind of turn this lemon into lemonade?
Absolutely. I also think it's important to tell people to get help all along the way. Because if you have that initial injury, I think my experience is I'm going to heal from this. But then that 365 days comes, and whether or not they get the PETA benefits after, or if it gets extended, or if they find out I can't pass my functional capacity exam, or I'm not considered fit for duty anymore. It takes time to actually have providers come to that conclusion.
Mhm.
And then sometimes we have, a pension board decision even. So all of those things, I think, are opportunities, unfortunately, for the moral injuries, or for the dream to kind of slowly die.
Mhm.
And to drag that out is really emotional. So I want to say, if you're going through that, it's important to get support and help, and to talk with someone that can retirement plan with you in a different way in case it really is going to amount to that huge change.
Yeah, yeah, you need incredible support, family, friends, hopefully people from work are able to show up for you too. But that is a hard one, and it's obviously so different for each person, depending what department they're in, what the nature is of the career-ending event. But I guess I can just point to the fact that I've seen people kind of turn it around and find something that really lights them up and gives them a place in the world again. So is it the same? Probably not. But you know what? I think any of us who have been blessed to work as a firefighter, cop, paramedic, dispatcher, whatever we do for any length of time, we are blessed, to have had that experience. And however long it is, sometimes it doesn't end on our terms, but we've done things that most people will never do. And so we kind of, I just like to shift to the positive side of it, because we could certainly feel sorry for ourselves, for eternity if we have a career ending, unanticipated, not on our terms. But we gotta stay positive, stay grateful for what we do have.
I love what you're saying, but a part of me knows that right over here I have a set of challenge coins that I've been given. They're all along my windowsill. One of them, though, is not, it's a challenge coin, but it's not a fire service one or a Leo side. And it was because he said, I'm so effing done and I don't like any of this or anyone. And yet he wanted to, give me a challenge coin anyway. And so I do know, I guess, as a therapist, as positive as you're spinning it, which is important and necessary. I have had those guys who are like, I don't want a retirement party. I don't want the cake. I don't want my walkout. I'm done with you. I'm going to go do real estate, or I'm going to go do this, fishing guide or whatever it is. And screw you. And so I'm kind of curious if you have any thoughts about that guy, the one who just is like, I have 4 weeks, 2 days, this many hours, minutes, seconds, and I'm done with you. What do you, any thoughts on that? I know it's on the fly.
I know yeah, I mean, I know the person. I've worked with that kind of person.
Mhm.
It's hard for me to relate to that. I just always felt like so blessed to, have the opportunity and on every level. And look, some of us are like, guess we're looking for the job to give us something, and my attitude was more like, how can I leave it better than I found it? So, I may not be able to give you a good answer on this because I was always looking to like contribute and not to, have an expectation of the job, of giving something to me. And look, some people do it a long time and get burnt out. I get it. Like it can be, it can be exhausting dealing with, you know, same calls over and over again, or same people, the same scenarios, and within the department, it can get old and it can wear you down. And that's maybe that is a good time for a change and to find something else. But you got to ask the question, like, what's my role in all this? Like, why am I looking at it like this? Like, is there something I need to take responsibility for?
I think that's a good point. And I'll add to that there's something called maybe as like street level as I can bring it to, there's something called battered spouse syndrome. So let's say you were in, an unhealthy relationship and you finally get to leave it. The divorce is finally final. But you find yourself, even though you finally get to leave that relationship, you have battered spouse syndrome. And so sometimes I find in retirement, we're doing a little bit of that work. We're working through trauma. We're working through the regret or grief of goals unmet. Or maybe you didn't retire with all the friends that you expected to have at one point in your career. Or you wanted to get into those chief ranks, but you never past a certain, promotion level. And at that point, I always invite people too that if part of retirement has to be after you're gone, after the divorce, we work through all those thoughts and feelings.
Mhm.
And that is also invaluable and maybe to be expected for some.
Yeah, I think many people may not be as extreme, but many people are going to leave the job with the need to process those things like you're describing. And I think that's a fantastic approach to have. It's probably rare when someone leaves a job and feels like 100% great about everything and everybody, right? There's always going to
Right.
be something like, but yeah, at the end of the day, I think we need more people like you doing that because it is huge, and I haven't really heard of anyone else talking about it like that. So, yeah, this is, in some ways we're pioneers, right? We're talking
Yes.
about retirement. It doesn't get talked about enough, and even talking about it's not enough. We need to be providing resources and tools, which you clearly are. So, thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I am looking at my notes here, and the other thing, was just talking about what about a backup plan? You had said something that you guys are able to cover. What's the future like? What's your backup plan? What do you think the guys should be thinking about throughout the career?
That's an important one, and there's no guarantee it's going to come to pass, but you have to figure out like what's my skill set? What do I love doing? I have a friend who retired from a big urban fire department up north, and he found his place as an instructor here in Florida and loves it. He's still connected with the fire service. He's still doing something, he's able to kind of take his skill set and repurpose it. Got to identify, what is it that you love doing and what does that look like in retirement? For some people, this is amazing. There's some people are going back to school and getting their degrees as a counselor or social worker, so that they can now help the brothers and sisters as a clinician. To me, that's incredible, right? Now, what could be better than a first responder bringing a whole career worth of experience and skill and knowledge, understanding what it's like to walk in those shoes, and now being, on the therapy side of it. So, yeah, I think just be curious, like, maybe you have to take an inventory. What are the 5 things I do really well, or I love to do, I get excited about doing, I look forward to doing, in this job or outside of this job, and how can I, what would it look like if I did that, whether it's as a volunteer, peer supporter, find a job, in training, or,
Yes.
it's different for everybody, but it doesn't hurt to have those kind of scenarios, kind of play through the scenarios in your mind, some different points in your career, but especially 3 to 5 years out.
Yes, and as you were saying that, I'm like, I think I did my pre-retirement move for my 40s by coming to Florida because I was like, I can transfer my skills down to Florida and go to the beach on Saturdays and Sundays. So yeah, finding what you love and making those gradual transitions are big, and having a backup plan for where you're going to go, what are you going to do, how are you going to identify yourself, what's the future template of your relationships in those scenarios, and are you already talking to your people about that? Because I remember being up north, the guys were always coming down to the Carolinas or to Florida or Arizona, and the wives were like, but my babies are here. What are you
Mhm.
talking about? Like, our kids are married, they just bought a house and they had children. I don't want to leave my grandbabies. So while I think some of the first responders are envisioning these big moves, I want to also say, don't forget to include your family and friends in what you're thinking.
Yeah, yeah, probably in general, that's a good thing. Like, yeah, we tend
Yeah.
to, I mean, one of the interesting parts of all this is, we tend to work in this, paramilitary environment. Some of us who are officers and leaders, are always thinking like, very mission oriented, tactically, strategically. But when you retire, then, you're an equal with your spouse. You're no longer like, you're not no longer the officer, you're no longer the shift commander. You're now, the husband or the wife, and that's a hard transition too. Like, you really have to scale back this like desire to like create order in every situation and impose your command instincts on it.
Yes, and I always try to say at the beginning, and maybe this is a different topic altogether, more like employee orientation. I say we should have a spouse support program where the spouse goes on a ride along and the spouse participates and gets involved in retirement planning and being prepared to deal with traumas. Because I know spouses don't swear in, but
Mhm.
they attend, they go to those ceremonies, and they sure do make a ton of sacrifices throughout the career, you
Right.
know.
Right.
So
And sometimes afterwards, watching their loved one suffer or spiral, in poor health or poor mental health. So, yeah, these are all critical aspects of this big topic. And there's so much to it. It's always evolving, but I love that you're putting the spotlight on it.
yeah. I'm kind of curious because I know we're getting close to the end here. Is there anything else maybe I haven't asked about or something that you can think of we should also throw in before we go?
Just looking here. Um, well, the physical piece, right? We touched on it, but obviously our emotional health, our emotional wellness is critical, but also going into retirement, how we taking care of ourselves. Some of it's like, simple as staying fit, right? Walking, moving your body. Some of us are very motivated on the job to stay in shape because, as firefighter, let's use firefighters as an example. Um, it's just critical, right? It's like part of the job is being in good enough shape to be able to perform under high stress situations with a lot of tools, weight, gear, thermal envelope on air. So you got to kind of figure out how to carry that forward. My case, I'm self-motivated, so I can work out on my own. But in part of my move here to Florida and not knowing many people, I discovered a group called F3, which stands for Faith, Fellowship, and Fitness. And they meet several times a week. I go to the one on Saturday. It's usually about 12 guys on a playing field. Every week, one person is the leader of this workout, and you know, it's
Hell
pretty
yes.
hardcore. It's a pretty hardcore
Yeah.
workout. And so to me, it's like it's a throwback to the fire academy. It pushes my my limits of what I think I can endure. You're with a bunch of guys. It's very kind of has a little bit of a paramilitary feel to it. So um, I think we need to kind of take care of ourselves physically and emotionally, mentally going into retirement. Like, don't take your foot too far off the gas pedal because if you take care of your body, it will take care of you.
Yes, I'm so glad you actually made that point because I don't know if I would have. And that reminds me that back in 2016, I got my yoga teacher training, my RYT, because they didn't emphasize enough in my training as a therapist that, our body and its groundedness and its health is a major prerequisite and foundational piece to our mental health.
Mhm.
And so as I went through that yoga teacher training and really started to emphasize with my clients, pull your shoulders down and away from your ears, take a breath, like spread your fingers because when we're tense, we grip, and spread your toes, ground your hips down, all these things to help push through some of the mental challenges or difficulties is really important. But if you are diabetes type 2, if you're nearing your heart attack and first stroke, if you, haven't been taking care of your, mental and physical health together, it will catch up at retirement. And you don't want your retirement to be about recovering from illness all the time. So it's a big job, but we're kind of asking everyone to consider like 50, 55 years old is so young. Come to retirement ready to live, not die.
Exactly. Engage with life. And, one other piece that ties into all of this, Sarah, is that in my belief is that when we repress emotions or even when we're processing traumas, that it's important to do it sitting there in the therapist's office, but I think we also need to move our bodies to kind of move some of that energy through, whether that's by running, walking, lifting weights. I do boxing. It
Yeah.
seems like emotions and energy are intertwined, and we need to consider the physical aspect of that and make sure we're like moving our bodies to dissipate it.
Yeah, that's the ding, 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 hit the nail on the head, right? So, yes, we researched that and proven it. So, very important to have the movement in there. If only for your lymphatic system, which doesn't have a pump, you've got to exercise to move your immune system, you
Mhm.
know? So, absolutely yes to that last point. Before we go, I'd love for you to, give more information about yourself or where people can find you, even though I'll link it below and I'll close us out.
Absolutely. Well, you can find our podcast, Responder Resilience, at respondertv.com, and that'll have links out to all our socials and all the platforms that it's on. My other podcast is called Igniting the Shift Within, that's on Firefighter Nation, which is firefighterNation.com. And our new book, Helping the Helpers, The Clinician's Guide to First Responder Mental Wellness, will be launching in September, and it will be on Amazon. You can go to helpingthehelpers.me. It's got a whole web page there talking about the book with a book trailer and other good information. So that's it. Yeah, Sarah, thank you so much for this great conversation. I hope we have the opportunity to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for listening. Again, I'm Sarah Gura, a master's level licensed clinical professional counselor in Illinois and a licensed mental health counselor here in Florida. My practice is the self-care path, and I specialize in treating first responders. Take good care.